welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with marketplace founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 18, and I'm excited to welcome on Eli Randel, who's currently the Chief Strategy Officer at CREXi. So CREXi is a leading commercial real estate marketplace and a great example of a breakout B2B marketplace. So I can't wait to jump into it and learn more with Eli. Before we do, I also want to give a huge thanks to Josh at Jackson Square Ventures for the intro to Eli. So Eli, it's great to have you join us on the chat, and let's maybe start off by you sharing a little bit more on your background and how you first joined CREXi.
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the hospitality here in this Zoom meeting room. I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in a commercial real estate family. And after undergraduate school, I moved to Miami, where I ended up living 12 years. And had several commercial real estate jobs. So it's an industry I already knew very well, and I really cut my teeth and learned it even better along the way. And at one point after graduate school, which I went to during the downturn, I ended up at a company owned by Starwood Capital, who eventually did a joint venture with a company called Auction.com, and on their behalf, I helped launch a piece of this venture on the East Coast. And that's where I met the founders of CREXi. We've been colleagues at that stop along the way, and had a couple other stops along my career. And then as Mike and company were forming CREXi in the real early days, he was leaning on me for some thoughts and some advice now and again, and kept twisting my arm to join the team. And I guess he called me right time, right place when I was not so thrilled with my then job. And I said, let's do it. And almost 5 years later, here I am.
So what was it like maybe in the early days of CREXi, tackling such a large market? What were the early days like?
They were fun, a lot of fun, in a very intense work sense. It was very raw. It was learning, moving 1,000 miles an hour, a lot of intensity, a lot of close friendships, and really brotherhoods and sisterhoods formed. But, with those intense friendships comes late night arguments and long walks where you're really going at it with each other. And, the beauty of our team was we could always, at the end of those walks, get to a good place, hug each other, and move on. And I think that's been a really powerful thing that I hope still stands at CREXi. But it's allowed us to, kind of bang against each other like two rocks and create some sparks and create some ideas out of those, and always end in a good place afterwards.
Awesome. So let's chat a little bit more about CREXi for those that might not know it as a marketplace. Could you kind of give us like a basic breakdown of it?
Sure. Commercial real estate, very, very large space, trillions or billions of dollars, either transacted or worked on in some form. However, it's very antiquated space, large inefficiencies that date back decades and centuries. And that's a good thing in some ways. In some ways, those inefficiencies have led way to a tremendous human element into the business, and these deal makers and these human dynamics, which we view as a positive thing, although sometimes being solely reliant on those can slow down deals and decrease liquidity in the marketplace, in addition to adding fee loads. And, analogy I like to use is, medical practitioners or doctors, they're not going anywhere. They're a necessity. They're a really important job and function in our world. However, technology can arm them with tools that allow them to diagnose problems quicker, treat them quicker, solve them quicker, perhaps prevent them quicker. So really, I believe, human and technology go hand in hand in our space, but the latter was largely devoid. So, we aimed out to connect supply and demand first and foremost, and that's really where we'll talk about some marketplace dynamics. There was a pretty large supply and demand disconnect, and it was almost as if sellers and buyers or supply and demand were playing Marco Polo from two different swimming pools. They just couldn't quite connect and required so much to interact, and we're hoping to act as a conduit of sorts.
Yeah, thanks for sharing more on that. So maybe let's, can we talk about the kind of breakdown of supply and, how you kind of brought that supply online?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share you guys, and I don't profess to be some expert who's done this, 5 times over, but we've come a pretty long way. And I'll share you guys, I think, a powerful recipe to marketplaces. Just as long as you credit me when it becomes a well-known statement. But one thing I think we learned along the way is, and I really believe this, and we felt it, we've seen it, we've lived it, is supply begets demand. And then the second half of that recipe or equation is demand begets monetization. So first and foremost, nobody wants to shop in an empty store, so you better stock the shelves with supply. We did that by befriending our customer and the broker and creating a low friction free product, which was very painless to use, and say, hey, why not? Then when we thought we had an adequate amount of supply, we started focusing on acquiring demand. And, there's plenty of people who are more profound at that art than I am, who can talk about demand acquisition techniques. And then once you're starting to make those connections and you're starting to spark some liquidity and transactional velocity, it's at that point, I believe, you can start thinking about monetizing. So perhaps that's an important distinction, because prior to really ensuring supply and demand were connecting, we were a free product. So, perhaps one takeaway on that is consider when to monetize or when to start charging for your product until, it may not apply for everyone, but create low barriers to entry, low friction, and, wait till some of those connections are being made.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a perfect segue. That was going to be one of my next questions, which was, I was curious to see at what stage did you start monetizing, and how did you think about bringing in monetization or introducing monetization?
So the first time we officially monetized, although we had some good pent-up demand and had some really good pre-sale activity prior to then, was March 2018. Which was about 2.5 years after launch. And there was just an inflection point the year prior, 2017, where we thought, okay, people are willing to pay for this service. We had a lot of customers saying, hey, we'd like to actually pay for this service. We think there are things you can offer if we do. And at that point, we really had a kind of militant SWAT Team 6, Deal Team 6 type group who, set the roadmap for monetization. We probably had about 6 months lead time. And for our previously free product, we set a paywall up in certain areas. And one thing really important is we wanted our free product to be outstanding still. It's a great entry point into our product, a great way to, learn about what we're doing. And we have all sorts of carrots and teasers into the paid version within that free product. So really the balancing act was creating this great monetizable premium version of our product without diluting the free version of our product to a point that nobody wanted to use it. And I think, fortunately, after a lot of customer conversations and a lot of hard work and sleepless nights, we hopefully struck the right balance.
Awesome. So just so we can get a sense of, I know you mentioned the date or kind of time on that. What sense of scale were you guys at?
That's making me rack my memory a little bit. I think at that point, and I'm shooting from the hip, so it's a little ballpark, and it's not necessarily going to be relevant to anybody in the crowd, because we all have different spaces with different TAMs and numbers of professionals. But I think at that point we had about 50,000 properties for sale. We now have about 150,000. And that represented, I could be doing the math wrong in my head, but I think it was like 250 billion in property inventory. And then perhaps, I don't know, call it 75,000 demand side users. And again, shooting from the hip, maybe 10,000 supply side users at the time.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing more on that. And then that was when you first kind of introduced monetization. And then I believe now you have 3 revenue models. Is that correct?
Correct. I don't know if I'd call them models because they all exist within the same ecosystem. They are very different in ways, but you know, there is some cohesiveness in where they exist. It's almost like 3 legs of the stool, but yeah, we have 3 businesses. Happy to go into those if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to jump into those. I know that was something the group was asking or talking about quite a bit in the Slack channel. So
sure. So we have our kind of SaaS marketplace, which was our core business. It was what we monetized in March 2018, and that remains our core business. And it's a subscription product that the supply side pays for. So for premium placement and some of the workflow management tools, there's a, you know, annual subscription paid monthly. That's our core business. Along the way, through all that transactional activity, we were starting to accumulate data on, you know, deal velocity, properties for sale, interesting insights, in addition to all sorts of publicly available data, which for the average consumer can be overwhelming and needs to be kind of packaged and curated. So we crafted some kind of MVP early on level data insights, comparable sales, which are public record in most states, and packaging those. So that's another product. It's still pretty early innings on that. MVP, but really good month-over-month revenue growth, but newer. And then last is a transactional revenue line. So there are different ways to sell commercial real estate. There's a traditional process, which our core business really revolves around. And then there are other outlets like an online auction. And given where our team had come from and our experience in that space, really, we hadn't focused on it at all for the first 4 years of the business, despite deep expertise. And we've had some clients come along and say, hey, if I wanted to sell my commercial real estate property in an online auction, could you build the technology around that? We knew we could because we have an amazing engineering team. That monetizes differently. That's a fee business. So thus our third revenue line emerged.
awesome. Cool. And that's quite a bit. So, you know, as a team, what is your kind of like team, you know, breakdown? Do you have product teams for those, you know, each specifically, or can you maybe share more about like internally with that?
Yeah, great question. So we have a very large sales team. And when I say very large, that includes customer success, SDR, BDR, and then account executives. So collectively, it looks very large. Each of those groups is, you know, carefully assembled, really good culture fits, who are dynamic salespeople. So that's a, you know, large portion of our company when put together. Marketing team, probably light in headcount, but we do deploy a pretty good amount of capital in terms of SEO, SEM, and customer acquisition. So probably less from a body standpoint, but certainly a big focus of our business as well. And then our product and engineering team works in cross-functional teams, less focused on individual products, although that's certainly a important piece of it, but often it'll be focused on something like demand or supply or platform. And the products will fall within one of those macro categories. But it's not necessarily just 3 teams focused on our 3 products, because there are other things that need to be done along the way, you know, platform enhancements and stuff like that.
Awesome. And then where do you just maybe so you can share a little bit more, where do you spend a lot of your time?
Well, that's a great question. I probably would have had a different answer for it had you asked me, 7 months ago.
Yeah.
I work closely with finance, operations, HR, legal, stuff along the way. That's a little less exciting for most, but, stuff that needs to get done. However, I think what's emerged in this post-coronavirus world is really you need to be in touch with people and effectively and swiftly solve people problems. So none of them are major. They're all kind of run-of-the-mill, vanilla stuff that comes up for any one of us, but it tends to take a little more time than it does when you're all in one workplace and can tap someone on the shoulder, go for a quick walk and move on. Now it's, chasing down people's Zoom schedules and stuff like that. So I think a lot of us quasi-managerial types have been sucked into, a lot of the maintenance of just making sure people are in a good spot and handling any issues that arise along the way.
That's a great point. And I guess to expand on that a little bit, how has, the COVID over the course of the past 7 months, how has that impacted, CREXi?
So it's been really good for our business. What's happened is certainly demand for any virtual tools is high right now, especially in commercial real estate and real estate, where it's something people are used to actually seeing and touching with their hands. And now anything you can do to replicate or act as a proxy for that has been an increased demand. So, from a product standpoint, our product's in pretty good demand. It's also gotten a little harder to sell properties right now for obvious reasons. And, when the market cools, perhaps we can become more valuable to our customer because there are a lot of ways we can increase their probability of achieving these big fees and really realizing their livelihoods. So, good from that standpoint. I will say we've been a little more conservative with our capital, and that's just to say a little more. I would hardly call it conservative, but maybe haven't invest or punched the gas as much as we otherwise would have. However, we are, fairly aggressive along the way. And then as I alluded to earlier, just managing people, talking people off the ledge, trying to make your team, make sure everybody's healthy, happy, motivated, seeing the light, still marching to the beat of the team, and all those things have definitely required some more nurturement than perhaps prior.
Cool. And I did have a question as far as specifically, like maybe within the supply, are you seeing, kind of a change of the breakdown of supply, or, more coming online recently, or?
I don't think we are just yet. We certainly have our close eye on it. I think we also are fortunate there's a lot of meat on the bone still within our space where, even if there was a macro trend changing that, we still have a lot of land we can grab. However, the commercial real estate market, in my experience, when it moves, doesn't always happen in real time. There's usually a little bit of a lag. And what happens is demand usually wakes up one day and says, man, feels risky out there. I need more risk premiums, or my cost of capital went up, or whatever, and can very quickly change strategies. Whereas supply or sellers usually, hang on to their old beliefs for an added 6 months or 9 months until they're really confident the world has changed. So oftentimes you can see a lag in seller behavior or supply behavior, whereas demand, it happens pretty quickly in my experience. But, with every change also comes some opportunities. So, some people, when they leave the market, others backfill it, and vice versa.
Yeah, I can imagine you guys have quite the, you kind of see quite the data though, ahead of time. You did mention that that is kind of one of your product offerings as far as, the data with the industry reporting. So I can imagine, that's kind of increased more recently too?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really interesting thing that happens during this time, and we're still very early stage with that, and primarily using some publicly available data as well as some proprietary data is, prior to this event, this black swan, people would look back into data and they would look back and say, who's got the most of it? And perhaps something from 10 years ago was still relevant. And it's almost like these market events, a reset button is hit, where maybe if you can't go as far back or as deep as some other players in the space, that's okay, because people only want comparable sales and data points that relate to today's market. And when you have this market shaking event, maybe it hits the reset button and you don't have to go back as far. So younger companies like us can report on what we do have, and it's relevant without needing to go as far back in time.
Awesome. And I guess maybe we should provide a little bit of context. So who is the data that you're selling? Who is it valuable to, and maybe how are they using it specifically?
I think it's valuable to a whole series of stakeholders, but I think primarily the focus is probably the demand side of the market. So someone coming in, considering buying a property, and they want to underwrite rental rates, comps, what other availabilities are out there, who are they competing with, what did something nearby trade for most recently. I think it really is largely used as a tool to underwrite and value commercial real estate, which arms demand side users with a value to make an offer on for an available property. So there's a whole series of stakeholders, including lenders and appraisers and sellers as well, certainly. But I think largely probably the demand side initially benefits most from it.
Got it. And then, so is that something that is that's a specific offering, or is that kind of packaged or accessible within some other kind of like aspect of the marketplace?
It's a specific offering. However, it is included in some of our packages with other platforms. So it may be included. However, it can be bought as a standalone as well.
Got it. Cool. And I'm not. I might have to apologize about the lack of deep insights in the industry. There's definitely something I'm super curious about too, which is, since it seems like there are quite a few kind of parties involved or stakeholders within typical transactions. I find it very interesting that it's been shared in the past that you guys kind of embraced the broker, initially. So could you maybe share a little bit more about, the decision to do that, and your kind of maybe even some of the, nuanced factors that were involved with that early?
Sure. So, it could be said, and some could disagree, and that might be valid, but that some of the legacy players in our space, and it's still a pretty untapped space, had maybe lost the connection with our customer along the way, forced to increase pricing, or for whatever reason it become somewhat of an adversarial relationship in some instances, not all. For us, it was really important early on that as scrappy young men and women, we knew low-hanging fruit was to be really customer-centric, and we knew it would behoove us to speak with and meet with our customers and learn what they want to build if we think they're actually going to pay for our products. So, right off the bat, we were hyper customer-centric. It was really important to us. Our customer is, in many instances, most instances, the commercial real estate broker. So we just embraced them. We really were, there for them at a human level. We listened to their ideas, assuming they were good ideas. We built product for them as they asked us to along the way, and built rapport and some of the, business 101 strategies of just customer relationships. So it was really important to us to embrace our customer beyond just a product level, but at a personal level. And it certainly helped us shape the product as well.
Right. I think that's great to hear. So do you guys kind of maybe expand on that in some ways that you embrace the customer? Do you kind of have a community aspect or any kind of like product interaction from a community side?
I don't know exactly what you mean by community, but I can tell you, I first joined the company. I was still living in Miami, but I was traveling to California a lot. And then eventually my wife and I moved to California. And, throughout, you could always find our customers in our office. Whoever was passing through town, whoever was nearby, we'd invite them in. We'd do a demo. What do you think? What do you not like? What do you like? What are you willing to pay for this? I think pricing discovery was best directly from the customer, knowing that maybe you didn't always get their real answer or an answer they even knew they had until you put a price tag on it. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a community standpoint, but we certainly included them and welcomed them into our community as a company. And I think they liked it a lot. I mean, I still hear stories of people fondly reminiscing and saying, I remember when we had that beer 4 years ago when you guys were working out of a little house in Venice Beach. And, I think they take pride in where we've come, hopefully, and hopefully where we're going. And certainly welcome them into our community from that standpoint.
Yeah, cool. That was that was a great answer, and that was pretty much it. So maybe speaking about, I did have a question as far as recently as far as growth. What are some of the primary channels of growth, I would say, on the demand side for your guys' marketplace?
Good question. So I believe even with our rapidly approaching 1 million MAUs, there's still a ton of meat on the bone from the demand side. It's a big space that touches a lot of people. There's a lot of opportunity there. And, there's a kind of ever-present debate of brand versus, digital channels as well, SEO, SEM. I think we try to touch all channels, probably a heavy emphasis right now on, search acquisition. It's not my expertise, so if I butcher any of these terms, don't ding me up. But, I think we try to strike the right balance with, some brand efforts and some content while also really deploying capital onto some SEO and SEM, channels as well.
Cool. And then since you did bring up capital, so just out of curiosity, can you maybe speak to you guys, history of past funding and what that journey's been like?
Sure. I think maybe like many companies, not all, a lot of the ones we read about have this, nascent, very traditional path, but they're probably in the minority. It was a long journey. There was no, seed A, B, whatever. There were notes along the way. There were seed plus rounds along the way. And I think the name of the game for us was to acquire the capital we needed without being too dilutive, and also finding great partners along the way. So sometimes you raise when you don't necessarily need it as much. Sometimes you feel like you're getting close to the wire. Our most recent round, which for all intents and purposes was done end of last year, beginning of this year, was the Series B, and we're really fortunate to have great investors come in. One of whom I think is a friend of this platform's, which is Jackson Square Ventures, a great firm. I think we're really proud of our investors. We like them all as humans, which is important, and we consider them part of our story and our team. And, I like to joke that one day I'm going to write the book about CREXi and this wild ride we had. And, we want people who earned their chapter, their pages. So we like good people who are smart. What I miss on that front, I know that was a kind of rambling answer, but
Oh no, that's great.
That's the journey.
Yeah, we'll be rooting for you for the for that book. So, but yeah, we
Great,
definitely
great.
a huge thanks to Josh from Jackson Square for sure for the intro. So he was definitely
Josh is the man. If anybody has a chance to work with him, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, he was on. I think he was one of our early guests for a group chat, and that was excellent too. So, cool. So we're about to kind of jump into some brief group Q&A. But keeping in mind, we're all kind of marketplace founders. Everyone from earliest stage to even some later stage. Are there any kind of maybe unique insights or learnings that you like to share with us that we didn't cover?
I'm hesitant to, get all professorial and try to share something that may come off condescending, because really, in many ways, this is the first time I've been in this position, and I'm sure you have a great audience who's, some people probably been there and done that. I think I shared my patented, recipe for success. I'll say it again. It may not apply to everyone, but it is kind of a light bulb moment that came to me or that I found along the way, which is supply begets demand. You need to have some items on the shelf to get buyers in the store. And then demand begets monetization. You need to start being successful in those interactions before you can really successfully monetize, whether it's a fee or subscription. For that service you provide. What else? I mean, I think, this journey we're all on is part intellect for sure. I wish I had some good tactical advice, but a lot of it's just like grit and just persevering and, hard charging and being passionate and, fighting through all the noise. So I'm sure everyone on here has their own experiences on that front.
Yeah, no, that is definitely the truth. It is a journey. So with a lot of challenges. Cool. So Marina, did you want to come on and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, this is Marina from Barcelona, Spain, and I'm just very early stage of a marketplace. It's called The Network, and we are now in the strategy and the roadmap. And I have one question. Is I was wondering if the 3 strategies of monetization that you have described was already at the beginning of the CREXi journey, or has been just appearing in
Great.
the journey?
Thanks, Marina. Good question. I'll answer yes and no. And I don't remember the exact timing of when they came up, but I think all 3 businesses existed in our mind in some form, maybe not right away, but probably along the way. But that might have been coupled with 17 other ideas. So yes, we probably knew these were 3 spaces we could enter along the way at some point on the journey. But it doesn't mean we always knew that's exactly how it would play out. There are probably 10 other viable businesses, which we may still pursue, but, maybe had to push those aside for the time being. So kind of yes, kind of no.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, that was a great question. I know that's quite a few people in the group have been asking about, the different revenue models for you guys. Cool. Hey, Dan, did you have a question want to come on? Oh, I'm mute. There you are. Hey, Dan.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. So here's my question. Can you explain why a broker would bring their clients to the platform if it risks showing the properties to other brokers, to other brokers' properties?
That's a good question. And once upon a time, I probably was fresh off some conversations there, and would have had a more thought out answer than I'm about to give you. But, I think there's a marketplace effect, and that's a two-way street. First of all, it's possible your property could draw eyeballs to a competing property. But the same could occur inversely. And perhaps there's people who just want a centralized platform to see all properties, and you better make sure you're on the shelves in there. Otherwise, you might risk missing out on a captivated buyer with really good capital who, by the way, may buy multiple properties. So I don't think that's a compelling enough reason not to put your product on the shelf. In fact, I would say that's highly likely they're going to absolutely buy a different person's property if you're not even in the store competing. But I would say there are also ways on our platform where you can share your property and only your property. So if you want to do an email campaign where you're promoting your property through our platform, there are ways so they're not really exposed to the full inventory until they, get out of there and go to the homepage and then start a search, et cetera. And they could do that anyways, at any time. So, in my opinion, if you want to get exposed to the most eyeballs, you better be at the Oasis or marketplace where all the buyers are shopping.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Are there ways, are you finding that sellers or brokers hold off on listing some of their properties until they get to a certain point and then they list it on your platform?
I think that happens in some instances, for sure. I think, that's like the people are already in our system. I don't think that happens. I think they're really happy with what we're able to do for them. And the demand side audience, we're really quickly able to bring them. So I think they recognize the value of speed and liquidity. However, when someone's first trying our product, there might be this hesitation to see what they can do without it first. And maybe in a cycle like we had a year ago, 2 years ago, that was a viable option where, you post something on LinkedIn and say, call me. And the market was so hot that, maybe you didn't need every tool in your tool belt. However, I think as, the economy is getting a little tricky and maybe it's getting a little tougher to transact, I just think if I were a seller and I hired a broker to sell me something, I'd want to know that they're using every tool in their tool belt to capture the widest buyer audience possible, drive pricing, drive speed. So I think that happens when someone's not quite a customer yet and they're having a purchase decision. Once they're in our system and they're a customer, I think they realize we're not a threat. We're only enhancing their efforts.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Welcome.
That's a great question. Cool. So I actually had a DM for someone asking me if I could ask for them. So they were asking what current markets or geographies do you operate in, and how do you think about expanding?
We are national. We're in every state. We're in all 50 states. There's still meat on the bone. We haven't captured the whole market, but enough of it that we're, fairly well saturated in every state, most major markets. However, that saturation could be in some markets, I don't know, I'm shooting from the hip, but 20% or something. So there's still a lot of organic growth in markets we're already in to capture. And then, we've since day one had calls asking if we'd consider going international. That's yet to be determined. We kind of tinker around with it, but we feel like there's plenty of growth domestically. So we'll see No expansion market per se, but certainly opportunities to grow our market share within existing markets.
Great. Thanks for answering that. So cool. Hey, Juan, did you want to come on?
Yeah, no. Thanks, Eli, for your time. I know you talked about talking to users, showing them product. Had a question. Do you still do that on your customer discovery, and how often?
Absolutely. We still do that. How often? Great question. I wish I could say it was as often as it used to be. And maybe it is, as we're a bigger company, maybe we still have the same amount of people coming in, but I think that should have grown with our company's growth as well. However, we've had customers join our team. So, internally our IQ has gotten really high as well. But I think the second we look internally and say, hey, we've lost our connection with our customer. We don't know what they want. We don't know what they're asking us to build. We don't know what they think. Then I'd probably look around the room and say we have a problem on that front. But it doesn't mean there aren't times where we should be doing it a little more. And then I think there's this notion in some sense of latent demand, or something your customers don't even know they want yet. I mean, I think if you asked people, I hate to use such a primitive analogy, but people who transport to and from work every day, if you ask them what they want, none of them would have necessarily come up with the idea of Uber or an app which connects you with a driver. So I think there's some things we perhaps can recognize that our customer doesn't always know they want just yet, kind of a latent hidden demand or shadow demand. So, I think it's up to our internal team to hopefully identify some of those value additive product enhancements that our customer may not even think of just yet, but really long-winded way of saying, yeah, we're still in front of our customers quite often.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. That was a great question. So cool. So we're going to wrap up here in a second, but it doesn't look like we have any more questions at the moment. What's something exciting, for you guys for the future of CREXi?
Something exciting.
Maybe that like you get excited about personally too.
What do I get excited about? It's a marathon. It's hard on a mile 15 or even less, I should say. I'm super excited about X, Y, or Z. I think really it's just continuing to do what works, executing better, adding to the team, adding the right fits to the team. Watching people grow, that's really been, it sounds cliche, but one of the most fulfilling things along the way is grooming young men and women to become these dynamic professionals. So some of that stuff excites me. Nothing necessarily distinct on the product front I'm quite going to share just yet, but I don't know, just continuing to truck along the journey and replicating what works and eliminating what doesn't. I mean, it's just, building a great business. I think what you learn along the way, or one thing I learned, is the idea isn't that special. I mean, recognizing that there's oil in the ground is insightful, but ultimately you need to build the vehicle to extract it. And I think that's the business. That's the collection of people. That's the collection of processes. That's your investor team and your board meeting cadence and how smart you allocate and deploy capital. I think building the business has become part of the fun for me versus the actual product or idea, which is highly valuable, but that's why we have product teams to obsess over that and sales teams to solicit feedback from the front line. So, I'm always excited about building the business and watching this organism grow.
Awesome. We'll love hearing that and the focus on the people too behind it. So, but cool. So that's a good note to wrap it up on. So where can we keep up with you?
Where can you keep up with me? Well, I'm not like a self-promoting social media guy, so not to say I'm not on it. I don't have a blog or anything. But anybody can reach out to me anytime. It's just my first name, Eli, at CREXi.com, and I'd be happy to speak with anyone, chat with anyone. To my own chagrin, I'm hyper responsive and I respond to everyone. I think it's the right thing to do, even if sometimes I get pulled down, scammy sales, outreach emails. So anybody's free to reach out. I'm happy to chat with anyone. And, if there's a business opportunity we can work on together, great. If anybody just wants to chat, feel free to send me a note and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to say you're great on the emails. So you and I both just going back and forth. So, well, cool. Well, I really appreciate the time. This is a really insightful chat to learn more about CREXi and some of your insights. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, and thanks everyone that joined the chat.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate everyone humoring me and listening, or at least pretending to listen.
Oh, it was great. So, all right. See you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys.